Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Effective State Aid Support for Innovation for Innovative Renewable Energy Technology seminar. As with all webinars nowadays, we have to wait a few minutes for everyone to log in. We have nearly 100 attendees already and more coming on board. So we'll just wait for 2 or 3 minutes and then we will get underway with our event. See you shortly. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for logging in to see us today, and welcome to our event on the effective state aid support for innovative renewable energy technologies. It's a great pleasure to have such a high-level series of speakers giving you in person and on video interventions, and we're looking forward to a lively discussion. As we all know by now, the rules are very simple. For all speakers, please ensure that your microphones are switched off so that we reduce all the background noise. And for all of our participants, you have the chance to directly interact with all of our speakers by going to the chat box and asking a question there. I will either raise the question at the end of a speaker slot or during the panel discussion, whatever is the most pertinent. Now, by way of introduction, state aid is one of the most important issues. It's in essence one of the key founding pillars of an effective technology policy initiative to solve the climate crisis. Sadly, all of the emission reductions that we witnessed last year through the lockdowns induced by COVID have rebounded back to where we are. So whilst we had a brief respite, the respite is over. The climate crisis is getting worse and worse every single day. This means that we need to think harder and faster about how we deploy at scale renewable energy solutions, which are the zero carbon means to solve our climate crisis, as well as aggressive measures on the deployment of energy efficiency. As we're all aware, not everybody is the same. So there are certain technologies which have a different starting point, and it's the difference between a quality where everybody is given the same box, and equity where people are given the right box that they need to participate within the game that we're in at present. And that's really where the role of state aid, both the flexibilities and the ability to design programs around each specific technology's needs, becomes so pertinent. This conference is sponsored jointly by EGEC, Estella, UREC, and Ocean Energy Europe. Everybody will get a chance to introduce their unique technology vantage points and their associations later on today. But firstly, I'd like to, with great pleasure, introduce Ms. Anna Colucci, the Director of DG Competition, to give us an insight into state aid as it is and what we can expect very shortly. Anna, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Surmak, for this introduction and for these kind words. And thank you to everybody. I would like first to thank EGEC for this very timely conference, because indeed, I think, as a Green Deal communication has clearly mentioned, new technologies, sustainable solution, and disruptive innovations are critical to achieve the objective of the European Green Deal. And since we are in the middle of revising our own state aid rules, this is definitely a very pertinent conversation that we should have. So thank you very much for having invited me and giving me the opportunity to explain to you what have we done, where do we stand, and where we would like to go forward. Coming back to the guidelines themselves, it is quite important maybe to come back a little bit on their functioning, how they have been used to so far, and how they have supported renewable technology energy. As you probably know, the current guidelines on state aid for environmental protection and energy were adopted in 2014 to promote effectiveness in public spending through a better contribution of state aid to the objective of common interest, but also because we shouldn't forget this important element, because it's part of the DNA of a competition regulator, is to avoid the potential negative effect of the aid on competition and trade. These guidelines, I would like to stress, have created a comprehensive and stable framework for public support, contributing to environmental goals and climate targets, while they have at the same time minimized competition distortion and maintained public acceptance of support measures. So basically making sure that the support to renewable technologies didn't at the end of the day resulted in too high cost for consumers. Since the guidelines entered into force in mid-2014, the Commission has adopted more than 120 decisions on renewable energy, favoring the development and delivery of cheaper green energy. It also favored clean mobility with the rollout of charging infrastructure and the move towards low emission mobility in public transport. We have adopted also schemes promoting the circular economy, such as the reuse of waste heat or recycling of waste, and also schemes promoting environmental protection, including electrification options. In fact, state aid spending for environmental and energy aid correspond to more than 55% of all the total state aid spending for all member states, and this included UK at that time. These are the figures for 2018 and 2019, and we can expect for 2020 to have some differences because of COVID, most probably. Many more renewable schemes have been also implemented by member states under the General Block Exemption Regulation, what we call the GBER. Therefore, under this regulation, member states don't need to notify these schemes. If we exclude the largest schemes approved under the guidelines themselves, the share of spending under the block exempted measures for energy and environmental protection correspond to around 40% of the total. Following an evaluation that we carried last year of these guidelines, what we call fitness check, we can confidently say that by and large, the rules have worked well. They have favored the market integration of renewable electricity, and the requirement to grant support to big renewable electricity plants based on competitive bidding process have given visibility to investors and have led to really a steep and fast cost decrease. For example, the cost of supporting solar power has been cut in half, and some offshore wind projects by now happen with no subsidies at all. The rules have also kept open the possibility to support for innovative technologies. Under the EAG demonstration project, which could be used as a proxy because there are no, I would say, specific provision for innovative project per se. But so if we use the demonstration project, they are granted exemption from some of the requirements, in particular from the requirement of technological neutrality. Here we can have deviation. They are allowed, among other reasons, for innovative technologies with longer term potential. Competitive bidding, so member states can grant aid without competitive bidding to installation with an installed capacity of less than 1 megawatt or to demonstration projects. And then market integration. The requirement for market integration requires the following cumulative conditions to be respected. And I hope I'm not stating the obvious, but I think it's good to remind us this very briefly. So aid should be granted as premium on the market price, whereby the generator sell electricity directly to the market. Beneficiaries should be subject to standard balancing responsibilities, and measures should be put in place to ensure that generators have no incentive to generate electricity on the negative prices. So these conditions, these cumulative conditions, do not apply to installation with an installed electricity capacity of less than 500 megawatt or to demonstration project. And in general, the GBER mirrors the above conditions. Moreover, while there are no specific treatment for demonstration project under the GBER, it is possible nevertheless to grant operating aid for the promotion of energy from renewable sources in small-scale installation up until the difference between the total levelized cost of producing energy and the market price. So as you can see, the state aid rules recognize the importance of innovation in this particular field. Having said that, it is also important to acknowledge that we are now facing a much bigger challenge. In December 2019, the European Commission adopted the communication on the Green Deal with the objective of becoming the first climate neutral continent in the world. And the implementation of the Green Deal will require significant investment from both the public and the private sector. Only in the next decade, and I'm sure you heard this figure many times, but I think it's good to repeat it because it's quite an impressive figures. So Europe will need an extra 350 billion of investment each year for green investment to reach the increased 2030 climate and energy targets for renewable energy, which at the moment is at least 32%, but with the new ambition of reducing greenhouse emissions by 55% by 2030, most probably the new renewable directive will need to have a even more ambitious target, but let's see. A lot of the investment will have to come from the private sector, definitely. But nevertheless, we will need the catalyst of public spending to make this happen fast enough. And it's exactly in this context that the Commission is currently revising the relevant state aid rules, and in particular the guidelines for environmental protection and energy. That should be adopted before the end of this year. The fitness check that I just mentioned earlier showed clearly that the rules have facilitated a more effective and less distortive deployment of state resources to improve environmental protection, but it has also showed that there are limitations. They do not seem fully adapted to new technologies and novel support types. For instance, in the guidelines, there is no mention of hydrogen, of storage, and most certainly no mention of future technology that will come into the fore, or the technology that indeed are of interest to you today. They are not also completely coherent with the more recent environmental and energy legislation, like the one that was adopted in 2019, the Clean Energy Package, and certainly not fit for the future ambitions that the Commission will propose with the Fit for 55 package, which is foreseen for June this year. And some provisions of the guidelines have been less successful than others. For instance, the provisions related to energy efficiency. And also what we have received or what we have seen is that some provisions seem to be quite unclear, too complex, and would need, clearly would merit some simplification and streamlining. And then obviously the level of ambition of the Green Deal and the recovery after the COVID-19 raise challenges that go beyond addressing the limitations that have been identified in the fitness check. So the revision of these guidelines aim at providing a clear, updated, fit for purpose, but also fit for the future, future-proof, enabling framework to help public authority to support deep decarbonization of the economy and to reach the Green Deal objectives efficiently and with a minimum distortion of competition. In terms of process, as part of this revision, we have had a public consultation that was launched at the end of last year until January of this year, to gather the input from all stakeholders. We have received numerous contributions that we are still analyzing and that are feeding the drafting of the revised guidelines. In addition to the better regulation requirements, so to this public consultation, we will undergo another public consultation, but this time on the draft guidelines themselves, which will be published or are foreseen to be published by end of spring of this year. So basically by end of May, beginning of June, and this second consultation of the draft guidelines will last for 8 weeks. Therefore, we encourage all stakeholders, we encourage you to participate to this forthcoming consultation and provide your comments and your contributions. And as I mentioned, the final adoption of the guidelines is foreseen for the end of this year. In terms of substance, obviously I cannot prejudge the final outcome, but I can already anticipate some avenues of reflection that we're having at the moment. It's clear that we should enlarge the scope to all technologies that can deliver the Green Deal, and also we need to facilitate higher aid amounts and new aid instruments. A new proper balance has to be ensured between widening the support possibilities, so the scope, the aid forms, and ensuring safeguards against undue competition distortion. So what are the objectives that we are contemplating at the moment? Is trying to make sure that that the aid is directed where it is needed, so that we have no crowding out of private investment, no greenwashing. We should also make sure that the aid is proportionate to the amount that is necessary, so that it triggers the environmental protection. We need to limit the distortion of competition and trade, ensure a level playing field between competitors and across member states. We need to promote cost effectiveness, so a minimum cost for the taxpayers. And when the aid is awarded, making sure that we have enough transparency, that there is tendering, that we broaden it to all possible technologies, and see whether and where, to what extent we can open this to cross-border. In the decarbonization area, which of course covers renewable energy, the market integration and the tendering requirements will continue most probably to be the guiding principle, as they have proven, as I said before, quite successful. In addition, we think that the technological neutrality will remain a guiding principle, but we are open to the possibility of technological specific support when this is duly justified. Moreover, exemption for small-scale installation will also remain possible. And we are also reflecting on allowing the possibility of funding gap approach as a method for defining the amount of aid permitted, so that this will give the possibility to member states to grant higher amounts of investment aid, which normally should facilitate the implementation of the project. I can therefore say that the European Commission will continue supporting the development of innovative renewable technologies, and in particular by facilitating specific measure for small-scale installation and demonstration project. This is under the EAG and the GPEC. But of course, these guidelines are not the only guidelines that can contribute to the green transition and to innovative projects. Indeed, member states can also support innovation and achieve their environmental objective with other type of guidelines, with in particular the research, development and innovation framework, the guidelines for the promotion of risk finance, the IPCI communication, or the regional aid guidelines that are all undergoing also a revision. As I mentioned, the green transition is a key priority for the Commission and competition policy, and state aid rules in particular are an important role to reach our green goals. And in that respect, our Commissioner launched also an overall reflection about how competition policy can contribute to the Green Deal. So not only the state aids, but all the instruments, which has led ultimately to a conference that took place last February, and which has also enriched our reflections about how to use our instrument to foster even more the green goals. But it's clear, and this is something that also stands out from our discussions and the conference itself, that competition it's not the main tool to address the green goals. Legislation is much better adapted, fit for that. So the environmental regulation, the taxation as well, and then the green investment themselves. But of course, this is not an excuse for us not to doing our share and our part in this important endeavor. So this is all I wanted to say about the role of the state aid guidelines to support innovative renewable energy technology, and I'm more than happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. That was absolutely fascinating. There's so much rich information that you've given us. I think my understanding is you have another 25 minutes that you can stay with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite any of our attendees or other panel speakers, if you have any comments or observations you'd like to make to Anna, please do put them in the chat box now, and to the other speakers, just turn your camera on and I will give you the microphone. If you don't mind, there's some things which, I mean, firstly, this was so refreshing to hear. I like the fact that you are kind of taking a step backwards and being much more open rather than blinkered in the view. That's a very important first step. There's just two things that I want to pick up with you. Firstly, the point about getting the legislation right is, I see all the speakers want to ask you questions. So you mentioned the importance of getting legislation right over state aid. That's something we wholeheartedly agree with you. One of our major concerns when it comes to heat and the market for heat is the kind of the current EU legislation locked into the internal market for gas, which de facto becomes the internal market for heat, rather than actually having a genuinely competitive market-based approach. So we certainly would be doing a lot more work in terms of trying to create a genuinely competitive market of open technologies. But there's two questions I want to get your views on. The first one is, given the importance and scope for state aid decision making, there's also an issue around the timing at which decisions are made. Given that we're at a crisis, we're trying to come out of the COVID crisis as well. So actually pumping as much money into this kind of innovative technologies is a way of stimulating our economies. Will you be looking at, time frames or kind of shortening time frames for some of the innovative technologies, but also some of the slightly more mature renewable energy solutions? It's my first question.
Sorry, what do you mean by time frame? The time frame we adopt a decision?
Yes.
Sorry.
A hard question.
It is a hard question, because we are always endeavoring to adopt our decision as fast as possible. And you have seen, most probably, at least member states know, that when it came to COVID, we were able to adopt decision within 24 hours, but it come at a big expenses, if I may say so, because our colleagues are working day and night to make that possible, and it's not sustainable on a longer term. So I hope we can come to a more normal, I would say, timeline. But your question is very pertinent, of course. As you know, since quite some time now, what we are trying to do with member states is to invite them to come to us as quickly as possible when they have already in mind their schemes, so that we can actually work together even before the scheme is completely, I would say, taken and in a way stable, so that we can already have this conversation about what could be the difficult provisions or things that merit maybe to be revisited, so that once we have the notification, the proper notification from the member states, we can actually adopt it within the maximum of 2 months. So this is the theory. Then in practice, very often things are much more complex than it looks like on paper, because you have different stakeholders that are interested, because obviously, and it's legitimate, the parliament, the national parliament, changes completely or substantially what had been discussed with the administration. And again, this is legitimate, it's normal, but this puts then the work again on the table, and you have to look at it. So I don't think that in terms, and certainly our procedural regulation will not change. But it's clear that on both sides there are really big efforts made having in mind that indeed these investments need to be taken in a very quick and urgent manner. And I can conclude with referring to the example of the recovery and resilience facility, where, as you know, member states needs to present their plans by the end of this, April. There, the Commission will take a position within 1 month, and the Council afterwards in June. But from a state aid point of view, we have already committed that as from the reception of all information, we will take decision within 6 weeks. So as you see, we are trying by all means to do this in a very effective way, and we are striving to do that even better.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Donna, I think you were the first in line, so please.
Thanks very much, Sanjeev. Good morning, Anna. Thanks very much for your intervention. My name is Donna Cagley. I'm the Policy Director for Ocean Energy Europe, so the trade association representing primarily wave and tidal power. You might have seen that the European Commission came out with an offshore strategy for renewable energy late last year, which targets 100 megawatts of deployment by 2025. And we've been just looking at that pipeline in the context of state aid rules. And I think it goes back to your earlier point about the difference between theory and practice. As you rightly pointed out, there's quite a few exemptions for demonstration projects in the existing guidelines, which are great in theory, but we're struggling with in practice. And the reason for this is that we're operating in a world where member states are very much incentivized by European legislation to focus on 2030 and not necessarily afterwards. And it was the same in 2020 under the previous rules. So they're very focused on deploying massive amounts of renewables, but not necessarily thinking about the technology we'll need after that to help balance the grid. And that was seen in the National Energy and Climate Plans, which came in last year. And of the 27 plans, not one of them got the thumbs up from the European Commission in terms of what they're doing in research and innovation for climate change. I mean, that's a bigger issue, more than just ocean energy or innovative renewables, but it's a particular issue for us because we get exemptions in the state aid guidelines, but we still need to notify. And it puts us in a situation where we need to go to national authorities and present them with a choice. They have limited resources and they can focus on getting state aid notification and approval for a 5 gigawatt offshore wind farm or our 5 megawatt wave demonstration farm. And you can imagine the decision, it's fairly obvious for them. So that's understandable from their perspective, it's the incentives they face. I think one of the ways of resolving this would be to look at demonstration projects again, which I believe are a proxy for innovative renewables, as you were saying, and seeing what we can do in terms of exemption from notification overall, even if it's 100% of eligible costs, even if a tender is impossible because of the nature of the projects which are already developed. And I think that's doable because the distortions to competition are extremely limited. I mean, if you look at our 100 megawatts by 2025, in the context of overall installed capacity across the EU, I think it's a fraction of a percentage. It's 0.1%, something like that. So in market terms, it's really, really limited. And of course, all these projects are being tracked by the European Commission, by the Joint Research Centre. In fact, the Commission is often funding these projects as well, so there's good visibility on the financing behind them as well. And of course, we know that even if you're not notifying to the Commission, you still need to observe the rules and principles there as well. So I think in that context, there's a very strong argument for exempting demonstration projects for notification entirely, so going beyond some of the exemptions that are already in the guidelines. Thank you. That wasn't really a question, but
indeed. I mean, I can only take note, of course, of this, and again, I would encourage you to participate to the consultation on the draft guidelines, because I mean, by replying to that consultation, you can also give a hint about what should then go to the revision of the GBER, which is obviously closely related to that, and the action would actually fit. So indeed, I mean, as I said before, we are at the moment, I cannot anticipate the text, but we are looking at how to streamline and simplifying even further the current guidelines. But obviously, I mean, in this respect, we need to have the figures, we need to have the tangible elements. But it's clear that we have a favorable, I would say, opinion in general on demonstration and project and innovative technology. At the same time, I mean, we need to make the arbitration to see what are the boundaries, where do we put the limit between the notification and between the exemption, so that these are the kind of I would say reflections that we have, but you can rest assured that that indeed we see less of a competition issue on this than on other grounds. So well noted.
Okay, thank you. Just in the interest of time, Marcel, Greg, and Marco, if you could make your questions a bit shorter, and I'll take them all in one go, and then Anna can respond to all three of you. So Marcel, you're first.
Well, thank you, and yeah, welcome to everybody. I have no specific question more than rather comments on intentions and let's say an outlook on this ongoing revision of the. So first on the motivation of state aid, we heard three keywords: effectiveness, to improve effectiveness in public spending, avoiding negative effects on trade, and higher cost for consumers. Each of these points is worth a own discussion, and I will not enter into that. But looking now at the progress, at the work in progress concerning revision, I think 3 points are essential. And we welcome at least the ambition or the intention, what we understand as intention of the Commission services when looking at this revision. One is absolutely essential that the objectives of the state aid legislation, let's put it like that, are aligned on the objective, or better aligned on the objective of the Green Deal. This is absolutely essential, and to that extent we welcome this kind of this approach. The point is how is this going to work? The second point is that this work on the state aid should contribute on to overcome the prevailing national approaches. We have a lot of problems in our sector with this national approach. I will maybe come back later in the discussion to that. And three, when we are this seminar, this discussion talking about innovative renewable energy technologies, I think the concept of innovation should be extended far beyond the purely, let's say, disruptive single technology innovation, but also on how existing technologies with a different maturity, even if less deployed, among the less deployed technologies, we have different levels of maturity, but innovation should be understood in a much wider context, namely hybridizing and blending together as according to needs the various renewable technologies and even the way how this blending is, how doors are opened to such a blending.
Also, can I just interrupt? Thank you for the kind of the statements there. We're kind of short on time, so yeah. Maybe Greg, if you could answer question, and Marco straight afterwards.
Sure. Thanks very much, Anna. I was very struck by the phrase that you used, which is that you wanted the future EEAG to avoid greenwashing, and as well as the European Green Deal, one of the other significant pieces of legislation to arrive in the last few months is the EU taxonomy. How much do you see the EEAG and the taxonomy being aligned in the next version?
Very good question. And Marco, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning to everyone. It's a common question, not only for geothermal, but considering the boundary condition for renewable. I give you a figure for Italy because, but it is quite common also for other renewable. EU Green Deal means for Italy to install at 2030 6.5 gigawatt yearly in order to reach the target. Do you know the installation of renewable in 2020? Less than 1 gigawatt, mainly due to authorization and administrative procedures. So this is one of the key barriers for installation of renewable. And so my question is, are there specific action in the GBER on guidelines for state aid to push administrative procedures and authorization? Thank you.
Some tough questions there. Anna?
Okay, so maybe react at the comments of Monsieur Vial. As I said before, one of the pitfall, if I can put it this way, of the previous guidelines is that by this stage they are not in tune with the legislative changes that occurred through the clean energy package, but obviously they are not at all. Not at all. They are not anticipating the ones to come, and that will be a little bit of the challenge. Is that we need to because these guidelines will come by the end of the year, but obviously the draft guidelines are already being published, as I said, by spring. So we need to anticipate any future changes that might occur in the legislation. So we need to think and to change a little bit the philosophy of the guidelines, rather than having, you know, specific chapters that are very detailed, to rather think in terms of principles. What are the principles that could guide any granting of state aid now and in the future, and that can be adaptable for future legislation? So that will be a little bit our challenge, and this is what we are trying to see how to make that best fit. Obviously, having in mind that if at certain stage it's not the case, we will have to revise them. But for the moment, we have prospects of at least 10-year duration of the guidelines, taking into account these challenges. Then how to make sure that they contribute to the that they have a more European perspective over the national one. It's always a little bit I would say the catch-22 for state aid, because state aid usually are granted at national level, and so we are trying, and we have tried already with the past guidelines. If you take, for instance, security of supply capacity mechanism, we have integrated their requirements for cross-border participation. So I mean, there have been already, I mean, this kind of thinking that have been included, and we will try to continue on this way. But maybe if we enlarge it, I'm not sure that we can make it an obligation, but we should incentivize it as much as possible. And then on the concept of innovation, I take note of what you're saying, and we are certainly listening to what is the debate and how innovation can be tackled. On the question of the taxonomy, very good and difficult question. I mean, the taxonomy discussion is not over. It's a very vivid, lively, and continuing discussion. Certainly the principle of the do not significant harm is something that is will be strongly embedded in our guidelines. The taxonomy, we will try to take it into account as much as possible, even if the taxonomy has been set for private investment more than for the public ones. Let's not forget it. And so you have to accommodate that to a certain extent. No, you cannot just take it at face value. But as you know, these guidelines are the guidelines of the Commission, not of a particular DG. And therefore, with all the other services of the Commission, we will see how to best ensure that it is integrated in the best possible way. You have seen as well that, for instance, if we take the resilience and recovery facility, the taxonomy is integrated in a different way because it has to be adapted following, you know, the objectives that need to be taken into account. So, I mean, it's not a clear answer I'm giving to you, but certainly the idea is to have it in mind and then to see if it can be adapted as such or whether there will be some element to accommodate. And finally, on the question of the authorization permits that are slowing down the development of renewable, we see that very often when we discuss with member states, because often tenders are undersubscribed because of the issue of the permits. And we discussed that with the member states, but I must confess this is not in our remit. This is really something that the member states need to tackle and to deal with. But I can tell you that when we have our conversation with the member states, this is one of the issues that we are always trying to look at, to see with the member states how to help, how to take that into account in the development of their schemes, how they can improve the situation. So it's part of the conversation, but as you can imagine, it's not in our remit. This is definitely something for the member states to tackle. And what I can see is that, you know, when the member state realize that our rules, especially on the tendering, will not change, that there is homework on their side that needs to be done, there is also an incentive for them to reflect how to improve the permit and the authorization system. So I've seen that that type of reflection taking place. But as for everything, it takes time. And then there are also the limitation, you know, the administrative limitations and the capabilities of some member states compared to others. But it's definitely an issue that you find in all member states. So irrespective of the capabilities that each of them has. So and not to mention as well, this would be my the last element, which is also what we are seeing in the recent years from the population, from the consumers and the citizens. There's sometimes also resistance to those projects to take place, and this is also something that we need to deal with.
Mm-hmm. The public acceptance point is very powerful. Thank you, Anna. I had one question in from a speaker, from one of the attendees. I hope we have time just to ask it. It's from Lorenzo Uing from AAT Geothermal in Croatia. He says that in 2018, Croatia's Renewable Energy Act introduced an innovative technologies category, and he's asking if, and this is a category for kind of public tenders in the innovative category. He said, do you think that this is a good way of approaching the issue of technology demonstration, especially for innovative technologies? And do you think that this then could help in terms of the administrative processes and the kind of the time scales for decision making that we've been discussing so far?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get the beginning of the question. How was this implemented or proposed? So the actual example? So
the example is that Croatia established a renewable energy act, a national act, in 2018, and it had a specific category within that act on innovative technologies. And the idea there is that you can kind of streamline the tendering process for the technologies, effectively to get as many new projects on board, create a pipeline of innovation, which is actually a very healthy thing to be doing. But the question then is does this help in terms of how you would approach applications or the results of such a scheme?
As I said in my presentation, we normally apply a neutral technology principle, but when it comes to innovative technologies, so there we consider justified to have technological specific tenders. So putting this in the legislation to have specific innovation tenders indeed can be an interesting avenues for member states maybe to contemplate in order to incentivize more projects to take place in this field. But again, this is indeed something for member state to look at. It's not something that we will prescribe, but indeed, I think what is interesting there, and that we are trying to do when we have a discussion with member states at the level of the state aid modernization framework, is usually we try to exchange best practice. And so, when we see that there are this type of schemes that could be of interest for others, this is, for instance, something that can be shared.
Thank you. I think that the idea of sharing the best practice around this act in Croatia will be quite beneficial to many other member states, and certainly a few associations as well. So I think we can help our colleagues in there. And I appreciate that we've gone over the time limit that you sent us. Thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. There was so much depth in what you said, and actually so much good guidance. So as a reminder to everybody, the consultation will be coming very shortly. I encourage everybody to take part in that consultation, and really let's help Anna and her colleagues with as much information as we can to streamline the decision-making process and the entire state aid guidelines. So thank you very much on behalf of EDGEC and all of our supporters, and a very good morning to you, Anna.
Thank you, and good luck for the rest of the conference. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And now we move on to the panel debate part of our discussion today. Regina, if I could just have the title slide, I will. What I'll do is we'll follow the order that's listed on the screen there. So thank you. So we'll invite Marco Baresi, who's the Institutional Affairs and Marketing Director at Turboden, and also on the board of EDGEC, the opportunity to go first. Marco has a slide deck that he would like to upload now. Marco, do you have your slides ready?
Yes, thank you.
And if I could just, yes, there we go. It's all yours.
Okay. As you have seen, guidelines for state aid and GBER need to be adapted to the new trend and policy. So very welcome this opportunity today. I have only a few slides to help discussion. I don't know if you see my slide. Okay.
Yes, we see.
Probably okay. Yes, thank you. What is the connecting thread of these three opportunities? Clean power in terms of baseload, stable but also flexible when where necessary, decarbonized heating and cooling, and e-mobility. The answer is geothermal, and why state aid is so crucial for this source. Geothermal energy is naturally is naturally stored under the Earth's surface, so it is an endless source of renewable energy which is available all the time, every day, and potentially everywhere. But geothermal power production is developed mainly outside the EU. So as you can see in the chart, is developed mainly in US, Indonesia, Philippines, and Turkey, with more or less 16 gigawatt installed worldwide. Do you know the installed PV in Italy currently? It is more than 20 gigawatt. So it means that, to give an idea, PV, photovoltaics installed in Italy only is more than geothermal power worldwide. And why? Due to some barriers, mainly related to the first phase in the geothermal development. I mean, for example, the exploration. Drilling accounts for 40 to 70% of the average cost of geothermal projects. So risk insurance brings down the cost significantly and making geothermal solution very cost competitive. The EU mandated member states to reduce capital cost for renewable energy projects according to the Article 3.5 of the Renewable Energy Directive. And risk insurance is one of the main ways to deliver these. And for example, we have a scheme set up in France for long-term guarantee fund, and also in Netherlands, when officially launched a geothermal guarantee scheme in 2009. So risk insurance is vital to cost reduction pathways for the geothermal industry. All national risk insurance schemes should be granted a block exemption from state aid requirements in order to increase the attractiveness of private capital into geothermal projects with minimum public outlay. Moreover, as you can see, geothermal power had a slow penetration in some member states in Europe compared to other renewables. So it could be considered in some cases as innovative technologies according to the Article 42 of the state aid regulation. And in my opinion, specific framework to boost this application is still recommended. The second aspect is the drilling, decarbonized heating and cooling. So drilling at a depth of 1 to 3 kilometers is potentially enough to install geothermal heating networks everywhere in Europe. In a large geothermal heating system, geothermal energy comes from an underground reservoir of water and hot rocks, and it is transported to a distributor network into buildings or processed in industry. Geothermal means decarbonized heating and cooling energy for buildings and industry. We have a clear example in Brussels, for example, with the European Parliament of the NATO headquarters or the Bundestag in Berlin, are example of application of geothermal heating and cooling in buildings. So we need to increase the investment aid intensity for renewable district heating and cooling project. Currently, the investment aid for energy efficiency renewable district heating and cooling project must consist of 100% of the eligible cost instead of the 45% of the current provisions. Renewable district heating and cooling solutions are capital intensive upfront, so providing adequate financing for geothermal and other renewable project is crucial to create the infrastructure for RES and support the market uptake of these technologies. The third aspect is the e-mobility. E-mobility needs batteries. Batteries, lithium is one of the key material of the, yes, the slide is probably doesn't work properly, but okay, in any case, e-mobility needs batteries and lithium is one of the key of the raw materials in the battery value chain. 200,000 tons of lithium will be needed for electrical vehicles in the EU by 2025, according to an estimation. But lithium could arrive from mining or salt desert, currently supplied by Australia, Chile, China, or Argentina, and considering the relevant environmental effect of this mining process. In a large-scale geothermal project, lithium deposits are often found in geothermal brines, so extract brine, separate lithium, and to reinject the fluid in a closed loop is a new technology called direct lithium extraction. And it is an innovative zero carbon technology. So considering this urgent need to meet the growing demand for lithium, geothermal plants with lithium deposits should be eligible for 100% state aid support prior notification. I had also an interesting slide, but not work, concerning the last book of Bill Gates. Bill Gates mentioned geothermal as one of the key technology needed to be pushed for the next decade. So talk about geothermal now is cool. Thank you very much. That's all from my side. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you very much, Marco. That was a fascinating insight into the world of geothermal, but also has many applications. Many of the keynote viewers have noticed that we jumped one of the speakers. So my colleagues are going to, yes, of course, even Bill Gates has identified geothermal amongst many other renewable energy solutions as the key means to solve the climate crisis. My colleagues are just going to upload the message that we have from a member of the European Parliament, Miss Stephanie von Kuyten. She unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, but she has kindly sent us a video message. So my colleagues are just going to play that, and then we'll go straight back to the panel discussion. Ready when you are. The sound is off. So we're just experiencing a few technical glitches, but we should be up and running very shortly, such as the and to all of our attendees, if you have actual questions for our parliamentary representative, then please do put them in the question box. We'll actually email them on to her so that you have the chance for your questions to be responded to. I believe we're going to be live shortly. Okay, it was working perfectly, but of course, when you put the pressure on in a live situation, technology, like children and animals, sometimes don't go according to plan. Whilst my colleagues are busy trying to work. Okay, whilst my colleagues are trying, are trying to upload the video, what we'll do is we'll find another opportunity during the initial panel interventions to play Miss von Kuyten's slide deck, but sorry, her video presentation. But if you don't mind, I'd like to move on to our next speaker, which is Mr. Donna Cagney, Policy Director at Ocean Energy Europe. Donna, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Sanjeev. I'm just going to share my screen briefly to show a few pictures. Put onto school screen now. Yeah, so good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to speak, and to Sanjeev and his team for organizing the event. So my name is Donna Cagney, yes, Policy Director, Ocean Energy Europe. Ocean energy, what are we talking about? Well, it's primarily wave and tidal devices. So devices that harness the different motions of the seas and oceans and transform it into renewable power. A picture paints 1,000 words better than any kind of description. So I'll just show you a few pictures of what tidal turbines look like, and then I'll show you a few pictures of what wave devices look like. And these are all kind of demonstration projects that I was speaking about earlier on in my intervention. So it gives you a feel of the sort of technology and the scale that we're talking about. Okay, let me finish sharing that screen. One moment, and I'm back. Okay, so in terms of our experiences with state aid in the context of ocean energy over the last couple of years, I mean, I mentioned it earlier on, you know, great in theory, problematic in practice, and we'll go back to that in a second. This takes on a kind of renewed interest, a renewed importance, I guess, given the role of ocean energy in the offshore strategy. So the European Commission and its offshore strategy last year recognized the potential of ocean energy. They could see not only is it renewable, but they also identified it as a technology like geothermal and concentrated solar, and my other guest panelists here, as a technology that can really help balance the grid post 2030. So once we get those high penetrations of wind and PV by 2030 and onwards, we're going to need other renewables to help balance the grid. And this is where it's really important we get these technologies to market and to technological maturity between now and then. So that's why ocean energy was selected for that. As I mentioned earlier, they came up with some clear targets. So the Commission undertook to coordinate with national and regional authorities on funding the first 100 megawatts of ocean energy technology by 2025, and then going up to 1 gigawatt by 2030, and that sets the stage for more widespread and large-scale deployments. We're very focused on that 100 megawatts because we know that's where the real critical learning is going to be. That's where we are going to get the most learnings, we're going to reduce the costs the most, and it's going to really set the stage for further rollout. So it's the first step, but it's also the most important step at all. And we've done an inventory of all the ocean energy projects that are out there at the moment that could be in the water by 2025. And they can all certainly be considered as demonstration projects, particularly in the terms of the definition that's already in the guidelines as to what a demonstration project is. I mean, just to give you a little bit of flavor as to what we're talking about here, there are a combination of wave and tidal devices, so some wave projects, some tidal projects. Average capital expenditure is about 60 million euros. So 60 million euro to invest in getting these projects off the ground. Now, that's not a negligible sum, but it's also not a massive sum in the context of the energy transition. And the important point as well is because these first demonstration projects are so expensive, the actual impact on the market is really, really limited. And I think nothing sums that up by the actual average size of these projects. So the average size is about 9 megawatts. So, I mean, for those of you in the energy sector, you'll have a feel for what that is in terms of the scale. For those of you who are less involved, I mean, it's a fraction of a percentage of national markets, either in terms of capacity or generation. It's, you know, 0.1, 0.2% of overall generation or capacity. It's minimal stuff. Very difficult to avoid notification for individual projects for a couple of reasons. First of all, these projects are kind of scattered across Europe. You know, there's 1 or 2 per country, maybe 3 max. This means that if you can't notify a scheme, member states can't notify a scheme. And anyway, schemes aren't really suitable for demonstration projects in their definition. It's also competitive tenders aren't really optimal or realistic because the nature of where we are in terms of our development, you know, there's a very small number of projects that are advanced in terms of grid connection, permitting, environmental consenting, technological roadmap, and so on. So you could have tenders, but everybody would know what the outcome of them as well. So not really appropriate. So schemes and tenders are great ways of avoiding notification, but they're not really open to these demonstration projects at the moment. I mean, technically with the guidelines, we probably could make these 100 megawatts work, although we'd have some issues with the thresholds in terms of allowed intensity and so on. But we think we could make it work if the national authorities devote time and resources to notifying, to discussing with the Commission, getting legal advice, responding to requests for information, etc., etc., etc. But as I mentioned earlier on, we can't really take that for granted for a couple of reasons. Largely, it's the environment and the legislative environment that we're working within. So national governments are very much incentivized to reach 2030 targets in terms of climate overall, but also in terms of renewable deployments. Up to last year, it was 2020 targets. Now it's 2030 targets. That's a really good thing. It's really important that's maintained, and hopefully with the new Fit for 55, we're going to see even more pressure in terms of renewable deployment, so that has to continue. But there is no equivalent mechanism or no equivalent pressure point in terms of developing the technology that we'll need after 2030. There's no targets that need to be met. There's no penalties if you don't meet them. There's nothing like that. That basically means that when we get to 2030, we'll pat ourselves on the back, we've reached our targets, and then we have to start thinking for the first time about what we do after 2030. We start looking for the technology. It's not there at the moment. As I mentioned earlier on, those national energy and climate plans from all the 27 member states sum it up. Not one of them, according to the Commission, was sufficient in terms of innovation and research policy being brought to bear to getting to these climate targets. That's, as I was saying earlier, that's a bigger problem. That's not just about ocean energy. That's not just about innovative renewables, but it makes a very concentrated and clear challenge for us, which is that member states and national governments are going into overdrive to meet their targets. Again, a very good thing, but they have to make choices about where they use the resources. And I think the example I gave earlier on, which is a real example, is you've got national authorities who need to make calls as to what they notify and what they pursue in terms of state aid processes. Is it the 4 gigawatt offshore, 4 or 5 gigawatt offshore wind farm, or is it the 5 megawatt wave demonstration farm? You know you'll be successful with the wave demonstration farm if you notify it for state aid, but it's going to take time and it's going to take resources. And in some cases, you may even need to give more resources because those extra exemptions, they need to be justified. And that's particularly the case when there's so little precedence out there in terms of state aid decisions on ocean energy compared to other more mature technologies, because there just isn't that case history to give you the certainty. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we can make this work quite quickly and quite simply with the new guidelines. The new guidelines need to make sure that demonstration projects, as currently defined in the guidelines, they need to be exempt from notification under any and all circumstances, even if it's 100% of eligible costs, even if it's not possible to do a tender for operating aid or investment aid, even if they're benefiting from priority dispatch or balancing exemptions or different pricing mechanisms and so on. Maybe that sounds a little bit radical at the start, but it's absolutely not at all, for a couple of reasons. Remember, these projects are minuscule. As I was saying to Anne earlier on, we're talking about 0.1% of the overall market. They're not secret projects as well. You know, the sector is always promoting our progress in terms of these demonstration projects. The European Commission's Joint Research Centre is tracking these projects and doing analysis of their performance. We have the SET plan where the Commission and national authorities are coming together and doing information gathering. So there's lots of checks and balances to check in on what these projects are and are not doing. And in any case, the European Commission is going to be funding quite a lot of them anyway, if not the majority, and potentially even all of them as well. So these data flows are going to be going. There's going to be plenty of transparency there as well. And of course, as I was saying, these state aid principles and rules, they still need to be followed, even if you don't notify. So, you know, those checks and balances are still very much there. So I think I'll finish up there. Just the final point I'd make is, I mean, Europe is a global leader in ocean energy, but we're not necessarily going to keep that crown. It's a fast moving field. The technology is advancing. Canada, the US, China, they're all pumping significant sums into the technology. And as we all know, they are not encumbered by state aid rules. So we need to keep the state aid rules, but we need to be smart about it. And I'll leave it there. Thanks, Sanjeev.
Thank you. Smart state aid. That's really the key word for today. We've actually managed to fix our technical glitches now. So my colleagues are going to present Stephanie von Korten's intervention now.
Thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm sorry for not being able to be in live with you. Nonetheless, I'm here virtually. I assume that the Commission already stressed that we are in the revision process of the stated guidelines that must be finalized by the end of 2021. The European Commission is consulting with member states to adapt these guidelines to our current challenges. As underlined in the recovery plan, we have two main priorities, green and digital transition. Indeed, the European Union has set high standards regarding climate change and sustainability. We have to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, as well as phasing out fossil fuels. We should be proud of these ambitious objectives, but we need to provide us, public authorities, industry, and civil society, with the adequate means to achieve it. This is not going to happen overnight, and it will not only involve the revision of state aid guidelines. Competition policy as a whole will have a key role to play in achieving those objectives and deliver concrete results for our future generation. It is time for economists, for industrials, for lawyers and decision makers to find common grounds and take their part in this transition. The European Union has to pave the way for a new competition policy approach fit to tackle climate change and the sustainability challenge. Let me start by a general point, but not the least important. Since very recently, we are experiencing a twofold shift in competition policy, but also in global environmental regulation. First, we all acknowledge the crucial role of private business initiatives in achieving climate and environmental goals. There is a consensus that private environmental initiatives form a crucial part of the policy mix, and that we cannot all expect from regulation. As the Commission underlined, the Green Deal can only succeed if citizens, communities, companies and organizations play their part alongside governmental policies and regulation. The aim is to bring about a change of behavior from the individual to the largest multinational, said Private President von der Leyen. Second is the paradigm shift from the European Commission on the role for competition policy. For almost 20 years, the Commission orthodoxy has been that non-economic factors must be excluded from competition analysis. This is starting to change, be it at the European Commission level, also in the OECD working groups, or within the European Competition Network. Many European jurisdictions, such as France, the Netherlands, Germany, or Greece, have already demonstrated that environmental benefits should no longer be disregarded. This main change tells us one thing: the European Commission is more and more giving up on its isolationist approach to European Commission policy. As I recalled in my annual competition policy report, European Union competition policy has to go hand in hand with environmental policy, but also trade and industrial policies, for instance. Money does not buy happiness, but it helps. It is the same with competition policy. We all agree that competition policy cannot be a substitute to regulatory and business initiatives. However, it is definitely an essential complement. Competition law is not a dogma. It can contribute to tackle the current challenges and accompany other policies and objectives as enshrined in the European Union treaties and in other sectoral regulation democratically voted. I was hosting, as you know, a webinar with European Commission Vice President Vestager, where she announced the launch of a public consultation on how could competition rules contribute to the European Green Deal. Just asking the question was quite a Copernican revolution. Almost 200 stakeholders answered the public consultation, and the final conference in February brought together the different perspectives in this important topic. Let me give you some food for thought regarding the potential evolutions from competition policy to address the climate and sustainable challenge. I will focus on state aid as it is the topic of the conference. Besides the fact that the Commission is now considering how competition rules and sustainability policies work together, guidelines on environmental protection and energy, as well as important projects of common European interest, EPCIs, are also currently under review. No one would argue that there is still an elephant in the room, as stated for the fossil fuel industry remains on the current guidelines compatible with EU law. The Dutch Authority for Consumers and Markets, the French Autorité de la Concurrence, the German Bundeskartellamt, but also the UK Competition Markets Authority have led the way in providing clear guidelines on environmental aid. These are good examples to design a European approach. First, we should rethink certain major methodological principles in the field of state aid for the environment and energy. We have to initiate a reflection on the current methodology for calculating eligible costs and on aid intensities. In some cases, aid intensities are limited to 50% for large companies, while investment in certain innovative green technologies or demonstration projects may require sustained effort. For instance, if we have to design a zero carbon aircraft by 2050, it will require massive investment. Secondly, we should ensure that integrity of the US emission reduction efforts in an international context. European border carbon adjustment mechanism is very much welcome in this regard, as it would make it possible to fight carbon leakage more effectively while helping to thin the European Union's carbon footprint. Thirdly, state aid rules should provide an incentive framework to advance the decarbonization of economic activities. Current environmental protection and energy guidelines and the general block exemption regulation offer a scope that is still too limited in terms of the types of energy allowed. It does not ensure a satisfactory playing field, and member states have very diversified energy mixes mobilizing energies that are not necessarily renewable but have low carbon emission, and that's not covered in these instruments where they contribute to the objectives of the Green Deal. We need to support industrial projects in key areas of the green transition and thus ensure that European industry is leader in projects such as the ship of the future, enable the decarbonization of maritime transport. Then we should also ensure further support to the decarbonization of economic activities by introducing a definition of low carbon energy classification and possibly introduce rules of categories specifically dedicated to low carbon energy. For example, the general block exemption regulation does not provide a clear exemption for the provision and production of hydrogen from renewable sources. Regarding the bonus and malus on state aid that European Vice President Vestager mentioned, I think it should be discussed. The main question, I think, is would the bonus malus be relative and reward a more virtuous beneficiary compared to the average of European and non-European competitors in the same sector? Or would it be determined in an absolute manner in relation to a threshold set by a European text? The biggest challenge relies on defining positive environmental benefits. In my opinion, we could explore the possibility to adapt the existing taxonomy for sustainable finance to state aid. Finally, we must clarify the guidelines for IPCIs, important project of common European interest, to be in line with the Green Deal by giving priority to projects where decarbonization is involved. The EPCIs are a concrete example of how competition policy could help industrial policy, but also green objectives. I will not have time to develop further, but I would also like to stress that competition policy is not only limited to state aid to support green transition. Evolutions in merger control, in the assessment of the positive environmental impact of cooperation between companies and abuse of dominant position will be key. It is also time to rethink the notion of consumer welfare, underlying that environmental externalities exist, whether they are positive, such as development of less polluting green energy, or negative, such as the costs generated by pollution. In all our regulations, including in competition policy, we do have to take into account environmental transitions are full part of the world we are living in, and that there are no sectoral policies. To conclude, climate change is the biggest challenge of our society. We must use all the tools and policy at our disposal to fight it. Competition policy and its enforcement are part of it. Competition is a means to achieve public goals such as maximizing consumer welfare, innovation, market integration, fairness, or redistribution of economic power. We have many things to do, and I wish you a very good time.
That was a fascinating intervention by Ms. von Kortin, and it's a shame that she wasn't able to take part in the conversation. I would love to have seen some of the questions, some of those propositions also put to Anna Colucci, because they are fascinating. The thing that really stuck out for me was the elephant in the room, which is fossil fuel subsidies, the need to be much more creative around the EPICIs, and also the issue around aid intensities and the abuse of dominant market positions, all of which are the kind of questions I think we want to pose to the panel as well, because I'll be interested to get their views. But what we're going to do now is just go on to the next speaker, an opening intervention from Marcel Bial, the Secretary General of Estella.
Yes, thank you, Sanjeev. And again, good morning to everybody. My name is Marcel Bial. As Sanjeev said, I'm running the office for the concentrated solid technology industry in Brussels. So I have prepared no specific slides for now, but at the end we will make make available a paper we published last year that says it most practically all I'm going to say is in this paper. So listen to me, and I will try to bring you a brief summary about what is the situation of this concentrated solid technologies, what matters currently to them, and as a little provocative opening, I think state aid is currently not the highest challenge this industry faces. But we're supporting this event. We're very much behind this because it touches upon a number of issues that do matter, are even essential for our industry. So what is today concentrated solid technologies, or CSP, today? First of all, it is not a young technology, a new technology. Worldwide, there are about above five already, gigawatt CSP plants installed in this for the power systems. And in Europe alone, we have 2.3 gigawatts installed. So it is no megawatts, but gigawatts, and essentially in Iberian Peninsula, and Spain and Portugal have even put in the national energy or climate and energy plans the further gigawatts, so 5 gigawatts additional in Spain and 300 megawatts in Spain. So it's not a new, it's not a young technology. On the contrary, the cost reduction, the rapid cost reduction that has been achieved in the last 5 years has been done with the absolutely standard technology. So the cost of this technology is driven by the volume of installation, about a market volume, and to only then by some marginal or technological innovation. So this is the first point, and our first concern in CST, as I prefer to name it today, as for technologies, is that the full value chain of these technologies is duly recognized and used in Europe as well. What do I mean? Even looking at the solar industry itself, as sometimes we're mixing solar industry and PV industry alone, but there is a kind of an obvious, in many publications, recognized complementarity between photovoltaics and CSP. The industry, the large promoters of solar technology have no problem to blend those technologies, and especially the thermal storage used by CSP in CSP plants is by far the most competitive and the most used storage technologies for bulk amount of energy. Brussels does not reflect that. And member states do not open doors to such blending in their auction or procurement mechanisms. So, which is the first point, which is essential to us, is the auction design. As any new capacity to be procured in Europe is still today is driven by cost level and also single technology, but always the same single technology focuses. So for example, I give you an example. If an auction is launched in a given country for new renewable capacity, and the value of the energy to be injected in the system is not reflected in the as criterion for selecting the winning bids. Also, there is de facto a kind of exclusion of a technology from the market. If further, even if you auction X megawatts in a given country and you don't care about the storage, how this new capacity can be handled with the adequate storage, in reality you exclude not only CSP but all the technologies from such auctions that are able to deliver more expensive but flexible manageable technologies. So this is this auction design, and to that extent it has something to do with the state aid regulation. This auction design is triggered in all the member states we are reviewing today in different projects, is driven by the interest, let's say, of national players, and do not at all extend to considering the effect of introducing which kind of new capacity into not even the big European system, but into a regional system. So this is the first point I would like to point. This auction, the procurement mechanism, and the type of support you procure, then this is where state aid comes in, directly or indirectly into a technology, is today the challenge for our industry. What is, as Marco said, for geothermal, what we are trying to get changed, and it is also among the ambitions now of the state aid revision, is to have on our technologies a wider approach. Concentrated solar is not only to be used, or should not be considered only for the power system, but also for heating and cooling and for mobility purpose, new fuels, and of course the hydrogen. Second point I would like to stress is the horizon or timeline given to our technologies. I would be straight on that. Today, according to our recent surveys, and so among TSOs and system operators in Europe, you have a kind of a lack of interest for manageable green energy. The TSO system operators answering that this is maybe something that will pop up after 2030, 2050 practically is certain, but nobody cares about the storage challenge in an active way, current, and this is not reflected in the way how new capacities and how technologies are promoted. So the horizon that must be, somebody said it, I think it was Donna that was saying this as well, the 2050 horizon must be taken on board when deciding about the various support instruments, let's put it like this, given to technologies. Third one, also addressed in my previous question and also in the revision of the state aid, is overcoming the national approach. This is not new. We use all together. We used to sing the Brussels songs about cooperation and integration. The reality is another one. Each member state is promoting and granting support to the industries it considers as being part of a national interest, the European interest coming only first, rather later. And this is not only valid for state aid with the exemptions that the member states may. All this is okay, but the national perspective is something that is a substantial obstacle to the deployment of our technologies. This is not something new. We have a very, very bad experience also with the uses of the cooperation mechanisms promoted by and still promoted by the new Renewable Energy Directive. This is a clear problem for the deployment of the energy and for achieving the best use of the natural resource and the capacities we have in Europe for moving quicker towards the ambitions, or getting closer to the ambitions of the Green Deal. This is what appears to me now essential for our sector, and I would stop with this just for the sake of time. We're quite late, to give the other speakers maybe time as well, but of course any question is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. That was there's some really pertinent and rich points in your intervention, and I want to kind of, once you've had Greg give his intervention, I think I'm going to go back and ask actually you all some of the questions that you just asked, or that you covered there. So without further ado, Greg Aerosmith from IREC, would you like to? Are your slides up? Yes, perfect.
They are, thanks very much. Yes, Greg Aerosmith from UREC. I'm Secretary General of the Association of Renewable Energy Research Centres. Now, research centres are not actually the investors in some of the projects that we've been talking about today. It's not going to be a research centre that goes out and deploys a wave plant. It's not going to be a research centre that goes and drills into the ground to extract a geothermal resource. But we're still very interested in this topic because we see the provisions in state aid for innovative renewable energy technologies as being a vital complement to projects which are funded through traditional R&D programs. To get a technology onto the market, you need to have technology push, where a call for proposals is put out and a technology is helped to get from TRL 1 to TRL 5 or 6. And then you need to get some suction from the market, and you need technology pull instruments. There needs to be space created in tenders to help create a nurturing environment for new tech. And of course, the 38 members of UREC expect to benefit by being able to help companies on their journey and help their technologies become more advanced the more they're deployed. Anna, in her opening statements, reminded us that the Commission has to tread a fine line between, let's say, a lowest cost energy system and also the need to adhere to the principles of the European Green Deal. But we've got one or two other considerations that we need to bring up as well. Commission is not just motivated by the European Green Deal, it's also motivated by something called the innovation principle. For many years, disappointed at the amount spent by member states and by the private sector in research and innovation, the Commission has introduced this concept of ensuring that all new EU policy or regulations support innovation and that the regulatory framework in Europe is innovation friendly. This, I think, is an important driver alongside the European Green Deal for getting the new guidelines to support innovative renewable energy technology. And what does that mean specifically? Well, we've heard some of the ideas today. We need to have technology-specific tenders. Mrs. Colucci referred to the fact that the principle shall remain technology neutral tenders. As we were preparing for this event and discussing within res associations, we came to the conclusion that few tenders are strictly technology neutral. There are very often considerations which member states will use to apply some restrictions to the technologies which may bid. This could be related to innovation. It could be related to complementary generation profiles from different kinds of technology. In any case, if we have a technology-specific tender, we're able to give an emerging technology the chance to demonstrate its potential for cost reduction and the potential future value that it can have in the grid. Then we also heard about the exemptions for demonstration projects. Long may they continue, and may we see also that some of the thresholds which appear in the EAG are revised upwards to account for the fact that a relevant size of demonstration has evolved beyond what it was in 2014 and is now much bigger. Then we kind of this morning also skirted around the fact that there is a possibility to tailor tenders to innovative technologies, and I think Anna was referring to this being possible in the general block exemption. But I say, let's not be quiet about this. Let's see in the new guidelines a more full-throated and visible endorsement of innovation tenders. Besides the example of Croatia, I can point you to a couple of such tenders that have been run in France and Germany. Let's say that PV has been the winner so far. France has awarded, I think, roughly a couple of 100 megawatts so far to PV deployed in new settings. And to address Marcel's point, in Germany, there's a particular interest in hybridization. So out of 73 projects, 72 of them involved PV being hybridized with something, but they've only done one innovation tender so far, and it may be possible for the criteria to be adjusted so that other technologies are incentivized for hybridization. The point about these tenders is you don't just look at the cost, you look at the degree of innovation, and in a report which we can make available to the participants afterwards, you can see that in France, the price accounts for 55% of the marks that you get in the decision about whether to award you a tender, while innovation accounts for a healthy chunk of 45% of the marks. So you can adjust these schemes so that they do really try to bring out new technology. So the experience has been satisfactory, and the tenders are expected to run until the second half of the decade at least. I'm going back to the slide that introduced the European Green Deal back in December 2019. I'm highlighting another petal on the flower. This one is digitalization. And I want to just fly the flag for the importance of helping companies to learn from each other when they deploy technology. I think it's our duty to try to achieve the 2030 targets as cost effectively as possible. That's something which DG Competition would agree to, I'm sure. And one of the ways to do this is to make sure the company does not repeat the same mistakes as its predecessor. What I would like to see is that technologies which are supported by state aid are given an incentive to share data relating to their operation. We live in an age now where data is easy to gather, it's cheap to process, and we're discovering the potential of algorithms and AI agents. We could detect interesting new correlations and patterns if we were able to feed these algorithms with a large amount of data. We'd be able to improve predictive maintenance on devices. We'd be able to predict performance of devices better, understand how their output can relate to different variables which we may not have expected. But in order to get these insights, we need to have a large pool of data, and we need to get companies to be persuaded to create that pool. So my idea then for state aid would be to say a bit of a bonus is necessary to encourage some companies to allow their data, high quality, scientifically relevant data from an operating plant to be put into a pool and to be available to other companies and to research centres that can interpret the data and extract novel insights, not just for electricity, I must stress, but also for technologies for heating and cooling in buildings. Very quickly, a few more ideas. We could imagine that it would be possible to be more generous to proposals which are in the scope of a territorial plan under Just Transition, the Just Transition Fund. They could perhaps be given some leeway in state aid. We could look at the cap provided as a general rule under the GBER for innovation actions and align that a bit more with what is actually practiced in Horizon Europe. You have to compare the 25% which is allowed for experimental development to what Horizon Europe will offer innovation actions, which is closer to 70% of total costs. And also, we've been discussing this morning about risk guarantees. You don't have to have, a risk guarantee does not have to be a state intervention. It doesn't necessarily imply a subsidy. You can imagine that a risk sharing instrument will pay out if a project underperforms, but equally it could be recapitalized if a project does perform, or there could be some part of the subsidy due to a project which is perhaps reduced because it is working effectively and it's been de-risked. So let's keep in mind that if we're talking about risk guarantee mechanisms, these don't necessarily need to be in the scope of state aid. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was, again, a very, very rich intervention. Okay, so we have about 10, 15 minutes for kind of questions and answers. So what I'm going to do is kind of pick up one or two things that that I've heard mentioned by a few of our speakers and kind of open them up to everybody on the panel to kind of comment on. The first one is, you know, Stephanie von Korten's point about the elephant in the room being fossil fuels, and let's be honest, part of that is also technology neutrality, which Anna Colucci mentioned on a few occasions. Now, her answer was that actually you need to design this out through policy. And I'm just curious, I want to kind of throw the question open to everyone here. Do we need to, whilst we need to get the state aid and the tendering process fixed, what's the one key thing that we need to focus on in terms of policy to actually ensure that there is a market for the kind of technologies that we're all, excuse me, that we're all representing today? So maybe I can answer Donna the question first.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjeev. And I think in terms of market deployment, it's really going beyond state aid rules. I mean, the state aid rules, and you just need to make sure they're not in the way on that. So you're right, it is a broader policy issue. I mean, longer term or bigger picture, excuse me, we'd really like to see some kind of incentives for post 2030 thinking, because we know getting to climate neutrality, it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. Although we have to go incredibly fast, we need to go incredibly fast for an incredibly long period of time as well. And I think we've got the first incentives right in terms of the acceleration and the speed, but we're not doing the duration, the longer term thinking. And we know what needs to happen for creating markets for new technologies. They need to prove themselves at demonstration stage, and then member states need to go all in. And they need to make clear pipelines of projects, or deployments rather, and allow the market to decide what those projects are. And they need to give the reassurance to the private investors that this is worth putting your money and sinking your money into, because these first projects are quite risky, you know. And if we want OEMs to get involved and large institutional investors, they need to know that there's a long-term 10, 15, 20-year plan for where this is going to go. So, I mean, from Ocean Energy's perspective, the offshore strategy was a great first step in terms of providing that trajectory. We just need to make sure that it's implemented now, and that the Commission does sit down at the table with national and regional authorities and does a deal and make sure that this funding are coordinated to make it happen. And then the national authorities need to come up with their own vision for what they want to do with the technology over the next 20, 30 years.
That's a very sound answer. Maybe Marcel, what do we need in terms of the policy sensitive view?
No, I'd like simply to come back to Greg's point about technology-specific tenders. And as much as I support the idea of this being a necessity, I'd like to give to the audience also a kind of 3 short examples about how the game is really played and how technology tendering design may impact the deployment of the one or the other technology, depending on national interest. I will not put this in one recent option was, for example, for procuring new renewable capacity, was there was a kind of a technology focus, one on PV, one on wind, and the other one was announced as being able to put a value on the provided storage or flexibility, if you want, in delivery. In setting and designing the auction, just with turning around and the duration time for this storage capacity, you de facto bring in a technology and exclude another one. If you put the storage, the valuation of storage will be about the duration of any kind of duration. Battery win the game, and you have battery bit in the game. If you say the storage needed is below or beyond, let's say 4 or 5 hours, CSP immediately kicks in and has no competitors. So this is the first example. Second example that I think Greg knows as well very much is a kind of a practice called underbidding in auctions. In very nice auctions, then you have a generator that may bid and under its own generation costs. We have a fantastic price name now. But the reality is that the auction design foresees that the winning bid will also access the grid beyond the PPA duration for its generation. So the promoters value above the technology cost this access right to the grid, and may go down with the offers on the generation cost, and so come into the winning bid. And the third one, to be short, also there is currently no auction or no tendering on measures around renewables that aim at improving the performance of existing plants. So here I can be specific. There is a very interesting plan.
Just in the interest of time, we've only got 5 minutes left. I just want the 2 more questions I want to go through, everyone. But the points you made are very, very pertinent, and I'd like you to flesh out the last one.
Nice to know. Okay.
Marco, would you like to respond to the question? what do we need in terms of the policy design to compensate for geothermal?
Yes, we have seen that geothermal, Europe is one of the global leader in geothermal technology, but the installation of the power plants are few compared to the other rest. So in my opinion, state aid could be a relevant push for the new installation, but we need a clear definition of innovative technologies, demonstration technologies, and also we have to enlarge the size available for the tender, because for geothermal power we are talking about 5 to 10 megawatt for Europe, so is 1 megawatt indicated or 500 kilowatt is not useful. In my opinion, it's also relevant to push for this geothermal application, because we are able to apply for a learning curve of this technology to reduce the cost and to be competitive for the foreign market. I'm a representative of a company, technology developer, and so it's a technology provider point of view. It's a real opportunity to develop, to implement competitive technology for emerging market and for developing countries. So it's a real opportunity for the EU technology to sell oversize.
Okay, thank you for that, Marco. You know, there's also another aspect to the kind of the technology, the innovative technology design, which is the lack of, you know, only one real funding source for demonstrative projects at, you know, pre-commercial stage, the Innovation Fund. I mean, I think collectively we all agree that we would like to have the existing fund at least doubled if we're serious about the timescales that we're operating to. I'm curious as to whether you think that actually this kind of the, you know, we have a huge buzz around hydrogen at the moment and the need to kind of build out a demand for expected hydrogen capacity in a certain period of time. Do you think that having that kind of a demand target would help your sectors in terms of accelerate the innovation process and look towards pre-commercialization or even commercialization? Maybe Marcel, would you like to go first?
I can only confirm that we see a real interest, especially in Germany, but extending to all other countries for this potential new market. And this is indeed seen for, this is for us a kind of a new entry door in the market. And we are currently working in demonstrate, not in the sense of demonstrators, but in demonstrated the type of energy that CSP may be able to deliver is supporting this new market. So it's for us a reality and a matter of hope also, where we this width of our concentrated technology come to a new life, if I may say so, beyond the pure perspective of injecting flexible or manageable energy into a power system. Yes, we can confirm that.
Excellent, thank you. And Marco, do you think that we should have a specific target for geothermal in 2030 and 2050?
Yes, of course. I completely agree with Marcel, so I'm online of this.
Excellent, excellent. And Donna, would the same be something your sector would favour?
Yes, and in fact, we have a little bit of history of that. I believe it was in Scotland, they had a similar target maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, where certain utilities had to purchase a certain amount of power specifically from ocean energy. And that triggered a real surge in investment into the sector. And we're still seeing those innovations working their way through different technologies now in both wave and tidal. So, I mean, it's got a proven track record as far as we're concerned, yeah.
Excellent. And Greg, do you have any views on that?
Well, I think I'll just go back to your first question, Sanjeev, about what regulatory step we need to be sure to take as we look at 54, 55. And I think that the NECPs are a very important part of the picture. I think that those are the documents where you're going to find out what a member state intends to do. And at the moment, we have less enforcement around these plans than we did in the renewable directive phase up until the clean energy package. I think we need to get our teeth back and make sure that if a member state says it's going to do something, then it follows through. Donna highlighted how R&D is being neglected in these plans. That's a great shame, and we can't allow that to happen in the next decade.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. If I was to just add in one additional point as well, I think that when we have kind of energy system planning and modeling, it'd be certainly good to reflect all renewable energy technologies and the contribution that everyone can make towards the 2030 and 2050 targets. I think that would help also, raise the awareness of the various technologies and the need to look at the whole basket of renewable energies than that fixation at the moment. We're at 12 o'clock now, so this has been a really fascinating conversation. We've had some really good interventions from the European institutions and the leading technology providers in this space. So I'd like to thank everybody who's participated, who's spoken to us, and I'd like to thank everyone who's attended, and we look forward to seeing you again at a future event. So thank you all and have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye. Ciao Marco.
Ciao.
Ciao.
A presto.
A presto.